It's a little long. It looks a little long, but I'll get there. With more than 30 years of experience in public health, Dr. Bassett has dedicated her career to advancing health equity and ameliorating health disparities. Dr. Bassett grew up, she's a New Yorker, grew up in New Yorker, and grew up in the city and received her BA from Harvard, her MS from Washington State University of Washington, thank you very much, and her MD from Columbia. Dr. Bassett's commitment to bringing racial equity lens for systems change to her extensive portfolio as a commissioner and her far-reaching work from New York to Zimbabwe is why we want to honor her, and she is honoring us with her presence. Thank you very much. And we're going to now play her music. So I have to tell you about this song. I love the old songs. I want to thank Candida for, that was just the best music from that time. But I thought, we're in the 21st century, I should get a new song. And, this is a song is special to me because it's by a Ugandan hip-hop group. And I don't know if anybody can play it one more time. But
Who's the number one spice? Who's the number one spice? Who's the number one spice?
There are a couple of reasons I picked it. One is that we should all remember we live in a very global world, and Candida just referred to that, and the fact that we should always remember the impact that our country and our culture has across the world. That was hip-hop music from Uganda, and it was the theme song of, I've been watching movies lately, I just, a lot of them are not that uplifting, but this one is, so I'll tell you about it. It's the theme song from The Queen of Katwe, which is a wonderful film about a young girl who is very talented in chess and becomes an international chess master from the slums of Kampala in Uganda. So I am very, very pleased to join you this evening, and I want to thank Candida for a really lovely introduction, even if I was slightly misplaced in terms of where I was standing. It's been such an honor to be the Health Commissioner for New York City. It's a position that I've held for going on 3 years, but I was honored to accept the invitation to speak with you this evening because social workers played such a critical role in the provision of our social safety net generally. And many of you work in the field of public health. In fact, I've already met some of the people who work at my own agency who are here with you this evening. So we're very proud at the Health Department of the social workers. Amongst us, my chief of staff actually is a trained social worker of the community organizing training of social workers. So I'm going to go a little off script, and I know that I'm only supposed to talk for 15 minutes, so bear with me. But social work has very diverse roots, and I'm going to come back to that later in my remarks. But there's the kind of social worker who does very important work talking to one person at a time. And then there's another school, sort of trend in social work, which is more outward-facing and really embraces the tradition of community organizing. So I want to start out with something, and I promised myself that I would say, and anytime I talk to a group of people, as long as it was over 10 people, no matter who they were, whether they were the CEOs of hospitals or a neighborhood organization, I want to remind everybody that we have a very important election coming up. And I hope everyone here is registered because you've passed the deadline. But I want to remind everybody that it's very important to make the decision on who you want to vote for and get out there and vote on November 11th. So, November 8th. Now, well, anyway, we are at a bit of a crossroads, and I share many of the same kind of history. And growing up, I came of age really in a little bit in the 1970s after the full loss of the 1960s, and was a huge beneficiary of all of the advantages that accrued from the hard work of many people who gave us the voter registration drives that led to the Voting Rights Acts, the Civil Rights Act, Medicare, all of these things that made such a big difference to our country. And I'm going to talk a little bit about an initiative that we've gotten underway here in New York City called Thrive NYC. I hope all of you have heard of it. This is spearheaded by the First Lady, Shirlane McRae, and social workers are playing a very big role in this effort. We have established something called the Mental Health Service Corps. The first 110 members of this corps, that will eventually be about 400 strong, have been deployed to neighborhoods that are underserved across the city. And the vast majority of the members of the Mental Health Service Corps are social workers. So we are very glad for that and very appreciative of the schools of social work that have worked so closely with us. They bring with them training and practices like cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviews, collaborative care, and they're going to be providing frontline mental health and substance use services in high-need settings. 70 of them are in primary care settings, and they're going to be working to do what we all know has to happen, the integration of behavioral health and physical health, and bringing the addressing of mental health issues into the primary care setting. So this goes to show what we can do when we do community-based work alongside with clinical work, and when we have an administration that will allocate the resources that we need to enable this work to go forward. In total, the Mental Health Service Corps is comprised of social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, addiction medicine specialists, and they are going to begin helping us to address the long-standing inequities in our city by working directly in communities where access to care is the most strained. Now, you know that mental health issues track with many measures of deprivation in our society, track to poverty. People are twice as likely to have a severe mental illness diagnosed if they live below 200% of the federal poverty line than those who live above it. This is unfair, it's unjust, and it's preventable, it's not acceptable. And that's part of our effort to bring into the light the ongoing issues that we face in our country with race and racism, an issue that we need to speak much more explicitly about. I learned coming in from your executive director that the National Association of Social Workers has been engaged with undoing racism. Many people in this room may have been and so I know that I'm talking to an audience that's already familiar with many of these issues, but I think that we all can do to talk more. And I think it's important as we go forward also to realize how strongly our own fields have been implicated in the history of racism in this country. Now, I usually am talking medical audiences, so I talk about the Tuskegee experiment, which all of you know ended only in the mid-1970s and was a study of untreated syphilis, men who were basically effectively barred from treatment long after it existed for the population because of the interest in studying the natural history of untreated syphilis. Or we can talk about forced sterilizations, which went on in the county of Los Angeles into the 1970s under the auspices of well-known academics, targeting Mexican women, targeting Puerto Rican women. But I thought I would talk about an example from social work, because I am here among a group of social workers, and I thought that would be of interest to you. Some of you may have, I've talked about this at a conference held at Columbia recently under the title of White Faces, Black Lives. So I know at least one person in the audience has heard me talk about how we at the health department have been inviting people to come in and talk with us on issues that we don't normally hear about. And one of the people we invited was Khalil Gibran Muhammad, who's now a professor at Harvard and was formerly the director of the Schomburg Center. A brilliant young man, gives us all faith in the future of sort of pioneering, challenging Black intellectuals in our country. And he came and gave us a lecture based on his book, which is called The Condemnation of Blackness. And he reflected on how our current response to opioid crisis, it has a lot of analogies to the progressive era. I hope all of you know that the face of someone who's addicted in heroin is now typically a white middle-aged man. No longer the image that many of us have with us from the cycles of heroin use in our city of a Black or Latino person. And concordant with this shift in the demographics of opioid use has been a shift in the attitude towards about how we should address it, from a punitive response, lock them up, send them away, to one that is much more supportive and caring and appropriate. So the shift is good, but the reasons that underlie it are ones that we have to think about. In any case, Dr. Muhammad started talking about Jane Addams, who is widely regarded as the founder of social work, the founder of the whole settlement house movement, a key figure in the progressive era at the beginning of the 20th century, really a paragon of what it meant to spend a life devoted to social justice, and in many ways that was true. However, her viewpoints also stood as a symbol of the era's racialized view of criminality. And she exemplified this very explicitly in her own writing, in which she tackled the problem of aberrant behavior among white immigrants and contrasted it to what she viewed as the aberrant behavior among Blacks, and mostly from the rural South who were moving into the northern cities. And there is a stark tonal shift in how she describes the challenges facing both groups. Writing for the NAACP, a premier organization devoted to the advancement of Black rights, in their journal, The Crisis, in 1911, she talked about how European, particularly Italian families, seemed to be able to control their daughters who were subject to the pressures of bright lights and in the city, and might have children out of wedlock. So she saw how immigrants faced problems. Their kids spoke languages they didn't speak. They were completely separated from their traditions in their home country. Nonetheless, she was confident, because they had the legacy of centuries of civilization behind them, that they could be acculturated and brought into the mainstream of American life, whereas the same controls, she felt, were simply absent in the Black community, which lacked the legacy of civilization. And therefore, she limited the tenement house approach to white immigrant populations and advocated for more social control and legal enforcement of the Black urban population. So you can see the same kind of themes that we see today over any number of issues. That when Blacks have problems, it's said to be innate. It's either in our genes or in our culture, our family structure. And when whites have problems, it's said to be related to the difficult context in which they evolve and to which they're trying to adapt. So this is clearly unacceptable. And it's one of the many issues that we need to begin to speak out about as we address racial oppression. How do we stand in solidarity with the groups that have been subject to centuries-long exclusion from American life and effectively pathologized. So I've made it one of my key focus as health commissioner to make talking about racism one of the key things that I do, both within our health department, introducing undoing racism to the training of our staff at all levels of the health department, for example. And also in how we face our work facing humanity. Now, I believe that this is the right thing to do. Frankly, that's enough for me. But it's also, I believe, how we do our work competently. We have to grapple with these issues in order to meet the mission of the health department, which is to promote and protect the health of all New Yorkers. But there's always so much more that we can do. I wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine that we have to use the tools of public health and social work to carry out more critical research about racism, to help us understand better long-standing barriers to health equity. And we have to look towards the makeup and the conduct of our own institutions. When I began as commissioner, I put the resources towards a group of staff to begin what we called internal reform, with the goal of our health department becoming an anti-racist institution. And we are now acting on the recommendations by staff to reform our budgeting process. We budget a lot of money. And this is not just being done by the health department. There is a goal on the part of the whole city to redirect funding and to ensure that we are providing funds to MWBE organizations, minority women business enterprises. So we're looking at our budgeting and our contracting, our recruitment, our hiring, the way in which we work with communities, our training protocols, our communication frameworks. This is a sustained commitment. And I'm sure that it will take time to do this. I may not get to see the work completed, but I believe that we are laying the groundwork with urgency, because we are at a moment now. I think all of us can see it around us. And I think one of the most important things that we all can do is to stand in solidarity and lend our voices in advocacy for racial justice. Those of us who work in public health and in social work have been afforded great privileges. We have tremendous credibility, and we should use our voices, our standing, to reinforce and to validate the critiques that so many people see in their everyday lives. We have a chance to make change. We have this chance because it's one that has quite literally been paid in blood. And there are many who may question us, many who are unsure, but I truly believe that the tide is turning, and I want to urge all of you not to let up. This is not the time to get tired. We really have an opportunity to make a difference. And I'll remind you one more time that you need to vote on November 8th.